Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing well. So for today I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do an experiment to share with you my results and to help those of you who have been facing some problem regarding their paints cracking in the pans or wells that they have put, especially for watercolor and gouache paints. So some people may have damaged tubes. For example, if you have metal tubes, sometimes from squeezing them they might get damage on the side, and this causes the paint inside it to harden up and it becomes usable and you throw it away. And other times, even if you put it in pans, for example in my watercolor pan, you can see here, for example, I have cracked paint. So similar to this, you might have cracked paints from time to time, and different pigments settle in different ways. So I wanted to give you help you around and find a way around this. And if you want to know how, please stay tuned in this video throughout the video so that you know which method from these three specific methods that I have now will be the best for your needs. So regarding the mediums that I have, or the additives in particular, first I have honey. This is simple honey, edible honey, which is found usually in markets. You use it for food, desserts, or whatever you want. As you can see, it has a really rich amberish color. This is glycerin, and this is the medical type. There's also the edible type, but I'm using medical grade because it would be stronger, I bet, and it would not contain any pollutants or stuff that might interact with the watercolor's longevity. And finally, I have this medium which I have been searching for many places, and I have been searching different brands and stuff, and I have found that MaimeriBlu, which is a very reputable brand, have them. And also they have another brand that also sells something similar to this, like a honey based medium, which is Sennelier, and those two have something similar. And I have contacted MaimeriBlu. That's why I got the MaimeriBlu. So I have contacted them to ask what the bottle of their honey-based watercolor medium contains, and they said it contains glycerin, honey, water, and honey-based watercolor medium, which is secret to their company. So I'm very curious to test this out and how it compares to the other mediums that I have here. So starting off with the tools, you will need first your medium, specific medium of choice that you will discover through this video. You will need a palette knife. These are very handy, especially for scraping paint or mixing paint with the medium, or even using to remove some medium and put it on the paint. You'll also need a palette or somewhere to collect the paint, or if you have a damaged tube, you can use one of these oil containers that is used for mineral spirits, to contain your mineral spirits. It comes with a gasket to stop it from leaking. You also would need something to stir the paint. You can use this, or you can even use a toothpick, a wooden toothpick that I'll be using here, and of course your paint. So for this video I have chosen these colors and paints. So let's start with gouache tempera. Gouache tempera is basically gouache, but the difference between gouache and tempera gouache, or gouache tempera, is basically this has a egg as a, usually they use egg yolk as its binding agent so that it can bind with the paper. So this usually dries faster, and I have seen that these temperas are usually more problematic, and they end up drying faster, and they crack up easier. So I wanted to use this as other form of, like, instead of using all watercolors. I have this, which is sepia hue from Daler Roundney. This is their Aquafine range, which is their student range, and this contains pigment yellow 42, pigment red 9, and pigment black 7. And this is student grade, so I wanted to use the student grade, and this has been giving me a lot of problems of cracking, as you have seen in the palette that I showed you. Next we have Cyclerite Genuine. This is artist grade from Daniel Smith, and this is from their Primatech series, which is granulating, and it is made from natural pigments. And I really have hard time rewetting this because first they dry up very, like most of the Primatechs, they dry up rock solid and they have a very hard time rewetting, so it's usually better to use it out of the tube. So I will see how it solves that problem. Next I have Kole, which is from Schminke. I don't know if you have heard of this, but if you would like to see a video, separate video regarding this specific watercolor, this is actually liquid charcoal, as they say it. It's basically, they have taken different fruits, in this case it's a peach, and they have grind the seed, and they use it to make this water soluble charcoal. And this is very interesting, like a very interesting medium on its own. And this, what I have seen or experienced with it, is that when it dries it has this matte finish. Most of those have matte finishes. I didn't go with other brands, for example M. Graham or Michael Harding usually has honey in it, so it's softer, but those usually have matte finish, and they are very hard to, like, they end up hardening in the pan, and they're relatively hard to rewet. And this one has very big granules, bigger than usual, like watercolor, and I would love to make a video about it. If you guys are interested, leave it down in the comment section below. So I wanted to see how this works with these mediums that I have. And finally I have this Horadam, which is also an artist grade watercolor paint, and this is Indian Red, which contains pigment red 101 and pigment red 206. And this is 2 pigments, unlike the sepia hue, which is 3. And this also, from experience, this has dried into very rocky consistent, and I would like to see how this behaves with this following additives to the watercolor. So for the procedure here, I have the control group, which is basically only the paint without any additives. I have honey, I have glycerin, I have the MaimeriBlu medium, and here I have all the mediums or the additives only as they are, purely without any paint, so that I see the color as they settle and stuff. And one thing to note, that I will be trying to be as scientific as possible, so I'll be trying to use like 1 drop of each medium. Like for example, I'll be using all these colors, I'll be putting them here on the palette and adding to each one 1 drop of honey here, 1 drop of glycerin here, 1 drop of MaimeriBlu here. So this is the most scientific way. Now you can be more precise in terms of using measuring stuff, like it is used when making the paints, but I'll suffice by just adding a bit, and the least amount is needed, since for good quality paint you need the additives to be so little, as much as possible, since you don't want to contaminate the pigments. You want basically the pigment load to be very high. So guys, I'll be start by adding the paints. So first I'll go with sepia hue. And I'll try to be as consistent as possible in terms of the quantity of paint added. And I'll fast forward the process so that it won't be boring for the viewers. So I have done the pattern of dots as you have seen, and the pattern is specifically because when I'll put the drops of different mediums, they will be larger than they are and they might mix, so I wanted them to be a bit farther than each other instead of doing that side each other. So let's start by our first medium, which is the honey, and I'll put just one drop, and I'll be try to be as consistent as possible with everyone, like with every medium and each paint. Now I'll be moving to the glycerin. As you can see here, they are trying to mix, so I'll try to take a Q-tip and remove it so that I stop the mixing. I decided to add a bit of masking fluid from Schminke in between them so that in the future if I leave them to set, I don't want them to mix and change the results. So after doing a bit of cleaning, I'll be finally adding my last medium, which is this MaimeriBlu. So I have mixed and added all the mediums as you have seen, and finally I'll add just a drop of each medium alone without any paint so that we see how it performs after a bit of weight and stuff after a week or so. So let's do that and we'll be done with the whole experiment. And as you can see, I don't know if the camera picks it, but the honey is the darkest and the most amberish color, followed by the MaimeriBlu, and finally the glycerin, which is basically transparent. So the white will help us most in this domain, since it will help us see which one affects the color of the paint the most. So I'll leave it like this. I'll just cover it with a piece of wrap so that it doesn't get any dusty and then I'll come after a week and see how things are and swatch them out for you guys. So guys, it has been a week since I last left those paints settle down on this porcelain palette, and I just got to do this small chart where you can see here are the names of the paints, different as you can see here on the palette, the same order as I have written them. And I also have here different consistencies. Here the first one is fresh out of the tube. Here this is the control. I have the honey, glycerin, and finally the MaimeriBlu medium. So I will swatch this for you guys so that you see how they act in terms of shine and hue, in terms of how the hue has changed over the different mediums that we used. And in the end I will give you my thoughts on what I think is the best for each use. So let's start into getting to first have a look at the paints and how wet they are. So starting now with the first control, we can see that the sepia is hard, and the white, I don't know if you can see, but the light is shining, is also has cracked. The gouache has cracked quite a bit, and charcoal, as you can see, is really matte. Like compared to the sepia, it's really matte. It has a matte finish and we see cracks on it. Regarding the Daniel Smith, we see also it's very rock solid, but it has a shine to it. And finally the Schminke, also rock solid, and as you can see I am forcing into the paint and it won't budge. So they have really dried well in this porcelain palette. So let's go into the honey and let's see how the consistency is. This for the sepia one, I don't know if you can see, but it's really sticky. Like I have some paint on my brush tip, let's wipe that off, but it's really sticky. For the white gouache, as you can see here, it's less sticky, but there's no cracks, and we can see that there's less separation than the original one here between the binder, and it's really less sticky than the sepia one. For the charcoal, you can see it's really shiny compared to the control one. It's really shiny and sticky, similar to the gouache. Let's see the, oh, this is really sticky. This is similar to the sepia one. It's on my brush now because of the stickiness, so I'll wipe that off, and you can see the marks that the brush tip has left on it. And finally the Schminke, this is also really wet. This is the wettest out of them all, as I can see. So this will give you different idea between the student grade and like the natural stone compared to like the artist grade. Now let's go to the glycerin. The glycerin, we can see that the shine of the paints are similar. The shine is a bit less than the honey, especially it's present here in the charcoal version. Let's see in terms of tackiness and wetness. Oh, this is so much wetter than the honey. It's not even sticky, it's literally watery. So glycerin has kept it really wet. So I can even, it's like out of the tube, I can even like see, it's as if it's out of the tube. So that's way runnier than the honey. It's not sticky. So let's look at the problematic gouache. I would say the gouache is similar to what we had with the honey in terms of the sepia and the other ones, except the wash itself with the honey. So with the glycerin, the gouache seems to be really sticky, as you can see here. So that's what you would get. And regarding the others, let's look at this one, charcoal. The charcoal is also wetter than the honey, but not as much as the others. Let's see. Oh, this is really wet, like similar to the sepia. It's runny. And finally, let's look at this one. This is surprisingly similar to the honey one. I thought it was going to be runnier. So till now, it seems that the glycerin is way more runny, like the byproduct of it is way more runny than the honey version, and this is especially apparent in the gouache and the sepia one. Now let's go finally to the medium, Maimeri medium. Oh, so this has been, I would say this is a combination. It's not sticky anymore. Well, it's tacky, but not like sticky to the point of having it on my brush. I would give it, I would say it's between the control and the honey version. We can see in this, I don't know if you can see it, but inside, regarding this gouache, we can see that it has bubbles formation and the texture is matte, similar to the charcoal. It's matte, and it's, as I don't know if you can hear it, it's like tacky. It's tacking to the tip of the paintbrush, but it's not sticky. I'm not getting any paint here, similar to the Daniel Smith one, the natural stone. And finally the schminke, they're all similar. So I would say that the MaimeriBlu is between the consistency of the control and the honey, so as if it's between those. And the runniest till now is the glycerin. So now I'll be swatching them out on the sketchbook, as I have told you, and we'll see how the difference in color changes in terms of how these glaze. So I'm using this flat brush from Jackson's, and I will do a swatch. For the fresh out of the tube one, I will just take a bit and then swatch it so that you can even see how it compares compared to the control one, since that has left to settle down in the pan, and I mean on the palette. And I will also, regarding those that are on the palette, I will just do 2 to 3 swipes and not more, to see how much paint I can take out the dried form and see how they compare to the fresh in terms of the, like, how strong and how pigmented they are. So guys, I have let the paints dry and on the paper, and as you can see, this is the final result. And I did one thing off camera. I had put here the mediums alone without any paints, and I just swatched them here. This is basically, as you can see, let me grab a pen because it's not so clear on the camera. So this is basically the Glycerin medium alone, and this is the MaimeriBlu, and this is the honey. From the colors, let's go more into the final resolution now, and let me talk to you what I would recommend each medium for which use. Okay, so regarding the final result, we can see here that all the colors have not shifted in terms of their hue. So the brown stayed brown, the red stayed red, just a bit lighter, a bit darker, so that's what was expected. So as you can see here, the sepia, the best one is the fresh out of the tube, is like the best form you can use the paint. But we can see here the Glycerin is basically a bit darker because I took more of the paint from the paint that had set on the palette, so that's why it's darker, but they're relatively the same. So regarding the uses of each, first I would like to say that the honey, the medium as itself, has a bit of shine to it. I don't know if it's clear from the picture, but you can see here in the video, I don't know, let me change the angle so that the shine, oh, here you can see the shine here. This has dried, all of these have been dried. So the first thing that I notice is that the honey has the most sheen like this, and it won't go away. It's literally sticky. So yeah, it's quite shiny. So for those who want to decide which one to mix, or you can decide like on your own, but what I would recommend is, if you want something that would make the hard paints, the paints that have like tendency to really get hardened and hard to re-wet, and they are very low in tinting, for example the Cyclerite Genuine, which is Primatech from Daniel Smith, is really low in tinting strength. So I would really encourage to use Glycerin with it. It's really good. And also, if you're, for some reason, if you want the gouache to set in the pan, I would recommend also using Glycerin because it was the easiest to re-wet in my opinion. So Glycerin, the drawback for Glycerin is that it will keep the paints really runny, as you have seen in the demonstration. It keeps the paint really sticky, so it's as if it's fresh out of the tube. So if you're looking out for something similar to the fresh out of the tube look or feel, then I would highly recommend you try the Glycerin. And if you're going to go for something that's more something that's more, how do you say, if something you want to carry with you or put it in a pan, Glycerin is not ideal since it's really wet, so it might spill or contaminate. As you can see here in the pan, that those are not pans. I just tried to put them beside each other, and you can see that the Glycerin had the most trouble, so I started to put like masking fluid so they don't change, like mix with each other, but they're really runny, so it will be very hard to take it with you. So for Glycerin, it's the hardest to contain, and if you're out and about and you're going to move a lot with your paint box, so Glycerin is really hard to, like, you really have to know how much you should add, and even if you add just a bit or a drop, it will make it so runny. So but it's really helpful for those paints that really need a lot of paint to, like, if you're going to take a lot of paint to put it on the brush. Regarding the honey result is fairly good. It's sticky, not as runny as the glycerin, and the problem with it is though that it's, as you can see, it has this shine to it. Now if you increase the quantity or the amount that you add to it, like if you add more honey to the paint, it will literally be shiny, so you will have a shiny finish, and it won't go away as the water dries, because it's like the honey itself. So here I just added a bit, so like a drop as you saw, but that's why it's not apparent in the swatches. But if you add more, like here, this is basically all honey, and you can see there's a lot of shine as you saw. And the color is also a bit like darker, as I said, so that would reflect in the paints, especially if you have whites and yellows, so it would affect them. And so I would recommend honey to be used with paints that are like not much, it doesn't need a lot to re-wet, but you're not happy with the fully natural form or the like the dried form, so you can add honey to it. But you have to keep in mind that it's good to like move it around, but if you don't mind the sticky feeling or the tackiness, then and the shine, I would go with the honey. And finally, the MaimeriBlu I would recommend for those who would that don't want to alter a lot the appearance of the paint, but just want it to be more easy to re-wet somehow. As you can see here, the results are similar to the control one, and also in as the looks and how they settle, they're so similar to the control one, as you can see here. For example, here the control one, you see this is the charcoal and it's really matte finish, and here it's also matte, unlike the other ones which have like shine to them. Like here the glycerin, you see the shine, and here the honey. So if you want something to keep like the consistency of the paint similar, but you want them to be easily re-wetted, I would highly recommend picking up the MaimeriBlu one, the medium. And it has, the drawback is, the only drawback that I would find is that it's not as easy to re-wet as the honey and the glycerin. Now you can add more, but it's not as easy, but it's basically the least damaging to the paint in terms of that, since it won't change the sheen and stuff of the paint, especially as they dry. So if that doesn't bother you, I would go with the honey and glycerin. But if the shine and like the change, the look of the paint in the pan and the feel of it, like it bothers you, you want to keep the original feel and stuff of the paint as they are, I would go with the MaimeriBlu medium. It's really good. As you can see here, even the results for the Indian red and stuff, and the sepia, which usually cracks and stuff, they're really good. They did crack there and they had this lumpy feeling, but with the MaimeriBlu it didn't crack. So if you want basically something to just remove the cracks and keep like all the other things the same, I would go with the MaimeriBlu. If you're going to do something that really has like hard to re-wetting time and you want to re-wet it easily, like gouache and stuff which dries hard, or the Primatech or the Schminka, which is the super granulating, I would recommend glycerin. If you're going with something that's more of, you want to change the characteristic, add a bit of shine to it, and make it more like it, also the honey helps it not to crack, but it also adds this shiny thing that some people like, some don't. I don't mind it, I actually like the shininess, so I would go with the honey. So this is my final verdict of the whole experiment. So guys, if you like the video and the whole explanation, please let me know. And if you have any questions regarding any of these mediums or anything you want me to try in the future, or even to do a review of this amazing and interesting charcoal from Schminke, please let me know in the comment section below. If you have any concerns or recommendation for any future videos, also leave them in the comment section below. Please share it with anyone who likes watercolors or even gouache, and this might be helpful because I tried to look around for similar content on YouTube, but I wasn't able to find anything related to this, like especially the MaimeriBlu medium. I never found any reviews of it, so if you want more in-depth video of any of these mediums, I would be happy to do that. Just let me know in the comment section below and I'll be happy to assist anyone. So take care guys and stay safe. Bye.